if you look at like the general gaming audience, I think people care a lot about graphics.
I am not gonna play this game. The graphics look too old. Plays WoW instead.
Goes and plays old school RuneScape. I think old school RuneScape is such a good example actually, because that game, like, the graphics are terrible. I know it's subjective. Honestly, it's called charm though. It's called charm, but like, you know, these are graphics from like 30 years ago, basically, right? Like, I mean, even when like RuneScape 2007 was current, these graphics weren't considered to be advanced at all. Because like it ran in your browser, it was like targeting low-end hardware, right? Honestly, I think it looks good. I like the art style. I think it looks nice. But I think that's such a good example of like, you know, if the gameplay is good, that's the most important thing. That's how I feel about it anyway. RuneScape gameplay is bad. I mean, it's okay. RuneScape's gameplay, it's got a certain charm to it though. Okay, how do I explain this? RuneScape's combat, I will 100% agree with you, is like looks exceedingly dated, right? And janky. But there is a certain amount of depth to it. And it's not just nostalgia, in my opinion. A lot of people say that it's just nostalgia, but I think if it was just nostalgia, like old school RuneScape wouldn't be doing as well as it is, like so many years in, right? And this is a bit hard to explain if you haven't played it that much. I played a bunch of old school RuneScape last year, but the gameplay of old school RuneScape, it's almost like the breaking the game that's fun. If that makes sense. Like, there's a lot of weird jank in RuneScape about, like, tick manipulation and prayer flicking and, like, pathing in certain ways. But that is, like, that's, like, one of the fun parts about the game. Like, mastering the jank. And I know that sounds ridiculous, okay? But, like, it's extremely different from every other MMO, but there is something about it. There is something about, like, old school RuneScape's gameplay that is genuinely very fun to master, in my opinion. Should I try to explain what I like about it? Honestly, there's many aspects, right? It's a big game. People like different things about it. But you know what I think is a big part of it? It's the cookie clicker appeal. You know, like how people like cookie clicker, where like they've literally just got it open in a browser, and then they keep clicking and the number goes up. That's a big part of why people like RuneScape. Like, they've got it open in a window, and then every once in a while they click, right? And they're like farming sand crabs in their other window, and they're not even focusing on it. Again, it's not all of it. I actually think RuneScape has really good questing as well. I think all the quests in RuneScape tend to actually be very original. Like, there's a lot of puzzles. It's very much not like go kill 10 rats. It's very like puzzle-y quests, where like you gotta combine items and solve puzzles and go to this part of the world and pick this, and that's another big part of the appeal, I think. You know what blows my mind? In old school, they added a whole new continent. Look, this is the world of old school RuneScape. In old school, they added all of this. This whole continent over here didn't exist at all in the original old school. This is all new. I used to go here to kill sand crabs down here. And I used to go here to the library to grind my magic. But basically, this never existed in genuine old RuneScape. This is all new. Current RuneScape 3, doesn't have this. This is crazy. Like, old school got like a whole new continent. RuneScape 3 is still on the old world map, basically. And again, that's not to say RuneScape 3 never got like its own like new content. RuneScape 3 has got plenty of content that doesn't exist in old school. But these games have diverged so much, right? Like, you gotta imagine, like, I think old school RuneScape is such a good example of actually a developer actually like listening to their player base. So you gotta imagine, okay, like, back in, like, what was it, like, 2010, 2011 or something? The RuneScape community was really not happy there were a bunch of things that the community was really upset about. Evolution of combats was coming in. There were a bunch of like controversies at the time. There were big player protests about lots of different things. There was the whole thing. Oh my gosh, there was the whole wilderness free trading fiasco. If some of you remember that, the player base was really upset.
Hello, Lara. Hello.
Yo,
chat.
what's up, Everphil? Thanks so for the 28 months. Holy shit! Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Basically, quits when Evolution of Combats came out. Yes. So the community was really, really unhappy. The community was not having a good time. And like, the game was bleeding players. And everything was looking bad. And a lot of players were saying like, yo, maybe y'all can maintain a version of the game that doesn't have the new combat. That doesn't have the new reworked combat. Like the old school stuff. Like the good stuff that we played for years. And initially, the devs kind of scoffed at this. They were like, nah, we're not going to do that. At a certain point, they went like, you know what? Like, so many people keep asking for this. We'll do a big poll. And like, depending on how many signatures we get, maybe we'll do it. And they went like, you need this many signatures for us to do it. And then it will be like a low priority maintenance modes, basically. And then they were like, well, if we get even more signatures, then like we'll add in some more stuff. We'll add a bigger team, and maybe we'll even consider like making some new content. And they did this massive poll, and like, honestly, genius marketing move, because people went crazy. Like, everybody started like trying to get other people to sign up, and it was like a huge thing on the internet. It felt like half the internet was like about like old school RuneScape being a thing. And then they launched it, and like, you know, now it's their biggest thing. Old school is like bigger than RuneScape 3. Like, significantly bigger. And you know, they've done all these polls like over time where they're like, yo, should we maybe add this feature? And they're like, well, we'll only add it if like this percentage of the community actually wants it. And they keep doing these polls. Now, then again, the community isn't always right. Sometimes there are situations where like a community can be wrong about stuff, right? But I feel like in most cases, listening to your players that are having a good time is like pretty solid. Not always. There are situations in which the players are wrong. I am often wrong, right? There are situations in which the players think they want one thing and they actually don't. But in most cases, players know pretty well what they want. And based on that, they've just been doing some of these polls about like, yo, should we do this? Should we do this? And it's just been a massive success. Like, old school RuneScape is one of the biggest MMOs out there. And I think a huge part of that is that at some point they went like, yo, let's actually like listen to what the player base wants. And they really did a good job at that, in my opinion.
Sometimes
genuinely,
communities are wrong. I mean, look at what the community vote turned Lion's Arch into.
Wait,
Freaky
I don't think that
SeaWorld.
was that a vote?
Loranity
The
cry.
SeaWorld thing? I don't think that was a vote. Was it? Was that a thing? Oh my gosh. I mean, the Abaddon Fractal. Okay, we should have gotten the Abaddon Fractal, let's be real. No. Oh my gosh. But yeah, listening to your players definitely did play. Not always, but like for the most part, yes. Like with a little grain of salt, but usually listening to your players absolutely did play. Remember when you said that we would do Guild Swan play for the end of the year? I did say that. I didn't listen to my players. Like, we're still gonna do it. It's just I've been busy. I've been busy with things. Okay. But yeah, it's neat looking at like how Guild Wars, how RuneScape has evolved into such a thing, and like old school is going super strong. Because honestly, if they hadn't, I think RuneScape 3 would have just like died a slow death, right? Like they would have like kept changing it, and they would have kept alienating more of their player base, and like I think the game would have just died after a while. And now RuneScape, old school RuneScape, is one of the biggest MMOs out there, and like it just keeps growing. Apparently, it's one of the few MMOs out there that's just growing. Like it's not shrinking, it's still growing, even though it's like a super old game at this point. It's placed Mindheld for Blizzard in their games. Listen to community, does this ever happen? Interesting comparison. Classic WoW. I think Classic WoW has done the exact opposite. Not to say that they've, like, failed at everything, but, like, Classic WoW, they should have just done Classic Plus, shouldn't they? Like, what, over in Classic WoW, what they're doing is, like, every year, or is it every series? I think it's every year, they release the next expansion. So we're up to Cataclysm now. They're gonna do Pandaria next. I think they've announced that. Like, they're just kind of going for all of these. And yeah, they did like Season of Mastery, and then they did Season of Discovery, but I don't really know what I feel about Season of Discovery just yet. But like, you know, they need to like go all in on that shit. Or well, maybe not all in, but like they're a massive company. You know what they need to do? They need to genuinely... Okay, again, I'm just a... I don't even play WoW, okay? But where I'm sitting from, they should like go and not do stuff like the WoW token, first of all, which they're doing in Classic, which I think is not great. But then secondly, I think they just need to make new expansions. And like what the old school RuneScape people, what they really get that like the new content needs to be in the spirit of the old game, right? So it's not like they're like turning like old school RuneScape into RuneScape 3. Like they're really good at like sort of being like, yo, we gotta like make new content in the spirit of the old stuff. Like I wish that Blizzard would do that for like Classic WoW. Like where they just make a new expansion for like Classic, which is like alternate reality in a way, right? Like, you know, what if we would have done another expansion in this stuff? I think that would be fascinating. I think that would be super interesting.
There was a poll, but it was only for naming locations.
Oh,
not
I
the
see.
design. Still
I see.
World, though. Loranity cry.
Yo, Ace, thank you for this bit. Honestly, though, I think it might happen. Well, isn't there a bunch of like... Wasn't there a bunch of hinting that like they were gonna like do like a bigger Classic Plus?
One of my favorite stories of listening to players, Warframe had this janky move in its initial years called helicoptering, where people would use a specific attack on a weapon to helicopter across missions to the end of it to get there faster. The devs at Warframe changed the weapon to get rid of the jank, but instead adding something called bullet jumping to replace it, which lets you move rapidly through the air.
Interesting, that's kind of cool.
Warframe movement.
That's kind of cool. Yeah, that exactly, Nedek. So, Season of Discovery seems like a cool concept, but it seems like pretty small scale still. It seems cool that they're experimenting with it though. I don't think it's quite Classic Plus yet. It's Classic with a very tiny plus. But I want to see proper Classic Plus. That would be cool.